You guys know I've been a big fan of this channel, Legendary Drops. It's been growing like a weed, and for all the good reasons. They do an excellent job of just laying things out extremely articulately, way better than I ever could. And I talk for a living, but this guy is spectacular. Well, he dropped a new video about DEI and its destructive influence on gaming. And I wanted to share some of the clips from this. Obviously, I encourage you to go watch the entire video and subscribe to Legendary Drops channel. I'll put a link down below so you can do that. But if you're new, make sure you hit the subscribe button here as well, as I find all sorts of great stuff to share with you guys online, talking about the insanity in the video game and entertainment space. But I'm glad you're here. Let's check this video out. It's called DEI and its destructive influence on gaming, here from Legendary Drops.
Today, DEI has become a hot topic in gaming. We see it in discussions around the failures of games like Concord and Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, where forced inclusivity and awkward character designs have been called out by fans and critics alike. Now,
key phrase in there. He said forced diversity. And I'm going to continue to say this. The vast majority of people don't care about diversity. Great. Fucking A. Awesome. Love it. It's when it's injected, forced into something that people care about.
Now, all eyes are on the upcoming Dragon Age the Veilguard, which many fear could be the next casualty of heavy-handed DEI influence. Fans that worry about the game, like others before it, will fall victim to poorly executed, ham-fisted inclusivity that feels more like a corporate checkbox than a meaningful addition to its story and characters.
Ah, yes.
It feels like a lot of these discussions peaked around 2020, which makes a lot of sense. The video game industry has grown exponentially over the years, overtaking movies, music, and television. And with that came private equity. Most publicly traded companies saw their share prices double during the pandemic, and with that came more investors and fiduciary responsibility.
Okay, just to be clear, just so we're all on the same page, fiduciary responsibility. There are people who manage money for a living, and they are, whatever, their job is to take money and invest it and hope you make money from that. A fiduciary responsibility is you have an obligation to always make what's best, the best judgment for your clients to make money. Your clients, your investors, whatever. That is what they're talking about. And if it doesn't make money, if you have shown, and the difference between like a financial advisor and a fiduciary is that if a fiduciary is shown that they made a decision that wasn't in the best interest of making money, they can go to jail. So just keep that in mind.
These companies are now expected to grow, not just in projects, but in employees, sales, and audiences. Whereas earlier in this industry's life, they could be casual, jeans at work, gamers making games for gamers. Now the industry leaders need to tighten their tie and show they are worth their money. This brings us to the idea of corporate social responsibility, or CSR.
Okay, this has not been talked about enough. We talked about DEI, but corporate social responsibility. And I mentioned this in a video a couple days ago, the idea of when you start a business, your job is to make money. Somewhere along the line, someone had the idea that, no, we can do more. We have to give back to the community. We have to show people. We have to virtue signal. That's what CSR is, corporate social responsibility. And it is, we've all been there. We've all been there. We've all seen it in corporate settings.
And how DEI fits into that. See, what a lot of people don't talk about is that CSR is the concept that many companies should do more than just chase profits. It's part of their social image to their stakeholders. They're expected to contribute to the greater good by being ethical, environmentally friendly, and socially responsible.
That's also a term that we've heard for the first time in the last few years, is stakeholder. Not shareholder, but stakeholder. Stakeholder more or less just means if you have any interest in that company at all, if you could potentially buy from that company, you are a stakeholder, not a shareholder. A shareholder is invested in that company. So it's just a blanket term for bullshit, more or less. That's what it is. And well, our stakeholders would like this. Okay.
DEI is a part of that. On paper, it's about making sure that companies are fair, inclusive, and representative of everyone, and that's not inherently bad.
Nope.
But here's the catch. While CSR and DEI are good in theory, they're often used by corporations to make more money. Governments offer tax breaks, grants, and other financial incentives to companies that follow CSR guidelines, and over time, companies simply just comply to maximize their revenue and avoid fines and potential lawsuits. So instead of implementing DEI initiatives out of a genuine desire for inclusivity, many companies are simply doing it just to get those benefits. This leads to a lot of issues in creative industries because this not only affects their approach to hiring and management, but also their games, leading to games that feel hollow with characters, stories, and designs that seem more focused on meeting corporate goals than delivering a valuable experience.
I would love to know where this started, specifically the CSR, the corporate social responsibility. Was that probably like it's probably a 80s thing, maybe in the late 70s? Like the hippies and such, they started getting into corporate culture. And then we need to have more responsibility. Or was that like in the 90s or early 2000s? You can find, like, let me know in the comments where the earliest example of you saw of a company that has to do good, like, I gotta be honest, like, if a company's job is to make money, like, that should probably be that. I'm good at that. I'm good at that, right? Unless you're like feeding me food. But if we're making video games, just make me fucking good video games,
Anyone who's watching this video right now that's like me, who's worked at a company at a corporate level, knows how these companies view CSR or DEI.
Yep.
They don't care about it. They feign it to the public, joke about it behind closed doors, and oftentimes only comply because they are absolutely terrified of HR lawsuits since Me Too, or they just don't want to get bent over by environmental agencies like the EPA or worker safety and OSHA because those fines are millions of dollars.
I know this from our show on a day-to-day basis. I know that you guys have talked about how you have to go to this training, got to go to this, and most people do exactly what Drops just said. Just fuck. I have to do this. I got to do this. Just it's go along to get along. That's all it is.
It's all a racket. It's a cold corporate response to heavy-handed regulation. As an example, in the US, we have OSHA, and it has a metric that's called TRIR, Total Recordable Injury Rate. It's a made-up score that levies the amount of injuries that you've had in a year and puts it into a pretty little equation and pops out a number. And if construction contractors even want to bid, I'm not even talking about work, I'm just saying bid on work, for most facilities, they have to be below a certain score. When you have companies that are out there that have tens of thousands of employees, accidents are bound to happen. And with such strict rules in place, they often find ways to blame employees, fire injured employees, or hide injuries to be able to protect themselves. Or in most cases, what they do is they lean on consulting companies, a multi-billion-dollar industry of companies that's ran by the self-same people that made the rules in the first place.
And there is the tie-in to the gaming space. Now, Drops has said multiple times he's worked in construction, hence why he is aware of this situation. But once again, it doesn't matter if you're video games. It doesn't matter if you're doing construction. It doesn't matter if you're at Taco Bell. There's all sorts of corporate just nonsense that has crept in, the over regulation of everything. That now, to be clear, I'm all about a safe work environment, but at a certain point, things can be too safe. We're dealing with kid gloves on everything that we do. And once again, and specifically when it comes to video games, we're talking about the video game industry, right? I've been in these studios. It's the most posh, ridiculously cushy job ever. Snacks everywhere. You got lounges all over the place, games to play. It's a fucking country club at most of these AAA studios. It's a joke, and everybody's so oppressed. It's ridiculous.
DEI has its own racket. The DEI consulting industry is valued at $97.2 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach $131.1 billion by 2031.
Ooh.
Snake oil salesmen developing new terms and sensitivity training to scare companies into using their services to keep them safe from regulators and lawsuits.
It sounds familiar, right? Didn't Sweet Baby Inc. literally say, hey, threaten your HR team with what would happen if they don't do this? Right? Isn't that the idea? Yeah.
You know, we've seen both games media and consultancy agencies say some pretty outrageous things over the last few years. So I want to ask you this. Do you think that these regulators and these consultancy agencies actually want people to get along? Do you think it really is about sensitivity? Because from my perspective, it looks like division is a very lucrative industry.
Woo! Man, preaching right there, Drops. Preaching. And nailing it on the head right there. It's like, do you anticipate anybody who's in this race grifting aspect, this world that they have, do you think they actually want to solve the problem? No. I've said many, many times, look, side scrollers was a result of looking at the industry and going like, yo, this is insane. That's why we've grown the way we have. That's why we have 3,000, 4,000, 6,000 people watching us on a day-to-day basis, right? It's amazing because what we're talking about, people have had enough of it. But is this ever going to end? No, because they profit from keeping things divided. Because they don't like, and I've said this many, many times, I would love to never have to do side scrollers. If side scrollers didn't exist, that'd be spectacular because it would mean the problem is solved. I would love that. Like legitimately, that would be spectacular. Let's continue on in this video because he goes in a little bit deeper about what specifically is the problem with DEI and how it affects the games that you play. And I thought this was really, really fascinating. This is a little bit longer clip. Once again, link down below so you can check it out. If you're new, do me a favor. Subscribe to our channel as well and hit the thumbs up button if you enjoy this type of stuff. I'm finding all sorts of videos like this throughout online. And my thing is like, I want to share it with you. I want you to go to their channels. I want you to subscribe. And I'll do my best to be the arbiter of consolidating all this content. And ultimately, we can all grow together, which is great. So with this, let's continue on. Once again, this is Legendary Drops, DEI, and its destructive influence on gaming. This is a little bit later on in the video.
The issue with DEI isn't about the principles themselves. It's about how it's being implemented. Like Thomas Mahler said, DEI will happen naturally if artists are allowed to be artists. The problem arises when corporate interests take over and diversity becomes a commodity to sell rather than a genuine attempt to reflect on the world that we live in. It leads to a disconnect between players and the games, and ultimately between the creators and their audience. And I think that's a fair and valid criticism to make because it's something observable. We can see it happening in the industry today. And while we've had a lot of games that have come out, absolutely incredible games, at the same time, the reason why players are so upset, the reason why this is such a popular talking point is because it's happening within the foundation of the industry. It's happening to the companies that are the very pillars that elevated the industry. The companies that made the games that made us gamers, Activision, EA, Blizzard, Xbox, PlayStation, the list goes on.
Listen, and he's preaching right here because that's the thing is all these people have grown up, you, me, tons of other normal men out there have grown up playing video games. They're looking around going like, yo, this is not the same company that I grew up with, and it goes back to how do we get here? Investments, having to deal with the corporate structure and everything else associated with it. It's been a mess. Oh my gosh.
We get why they're doing it. It's all for money. But the funny thing is that they're losing a lot of it doing what they've been doing. And it's got me thinking, I've noticed over the last couple of years, some of these breakout successes that we've seen have reached incredible heights that I don't think that they would have reached if it wasn't for the fact that the industry is in the state that it's in. They created this situation. They swung the pendulum in one direction and now it's stuck. And because of that, their competition is getting richer by the day. They're getting more fans. They're getting more support. And it's going to make it even more difficult for some of these companies to be able to back out of the position that they're in.
Like real talk. Do you think Stellar Blade, Helldivers, games like that saw success in 2024 in just a regular year would have seen the success that they've seen? Maybe. But I think realistically, probably not, right? Because they were seen as a pushback. Now, and he brings up a great point, the idea that creating an alternative is one of the reasons why these games are successful, right? Let me know down in the comments.
Baldur's Gate 3, Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade, Space Marine 2, Helldivers 2, Pal World. There's a huge list of games that we've seen come out over the last couple of years that have been absolute bangers. And there's an ocean of difference with the quality and feel of those games and some of these patronizing attempts at guilting us out of our money. Even more so, games that are putting themselves in a position that we feel guilty for trying to voice our criticisms on. And they really like that last part. Us not wanting to voice our criticisms. Characters, identities, DEI, none of these things.
Is that not the truth? Hey, don't ask questions, just consume. So I moved away from using the word consumer and once again, moving to customer. You guys pointed that out to me and customer is right. They have to get us to part with our money before we play games. They're doing the hard part. We're doing the easy part. Spend the money. They have to take the money from us. They have to want, that's the biggest thing here. But if you're critical of it, you're an istophobe, whatever.
Were dominant talking points in the gaming industry before because, to be quite frank, nobody cared or noticed. Games were seen as a universal medium where anyone could find something to enjoy. In the past, developers didn't feel the need to loudly proclaim that their game was diverse. It was just a natural part of the storytelling.
Preach.
Characters were designed to fit the narrative or the gameplay, not to check boxes for representation.
Yes.
This allowed games back then to thrive creatively with unique and varied experiences that applied or appealed to different audiences. And I think that's the most important part. Not every game was made for everyone, but there was always something to find for everyone. Players simply just connected with characters, or they ignored the ones that they didn't relate to, and the focus always remained on the game's quality rather than the demographic that they were trying to reach. It's only...
Woo! Man, that's hot. There's so much in that sense. How many of y'all grew up playing games or have played games? And to even take a step back further, this idea that this is how games used to be. This is like a decade ago. Like not long ago, games were like this. Like within a generation, somewhere in the PlayStation 4 era into PlayStation 5, the switch was flipped. It's crazy to think how that happened. Somewhere along the lines. Oh my gosh. But yeah, once again, going back, how many of y'all like played a game played a character that didn't look anything like you at all? Didn't have any personality traits. In fact, you went out of your way to play as them because they didn't look anything like you, because they were different than you. I know I did, right? I know that's how most of you did. It's amazing.
In recent years that character identities have been pushed to the forefront, making DEI feel constant, this forced presence in every conversation, often distracting from the core of what games are supposed to be: engaging, fun, and worth our money. Now, identity is the only thing people talk about. Now, this may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but genuine racism, bigotry, and hate actually exist. There are studios and developers today that are under a constant barrage of hate from fans and people that will never even play their games. Just recently, I watched a panel that was criticizing comments that were made by the studio head of Tales of Kenzera Zhao. The studio ended up announcing their hiatus due to the game's poor performance. A game that ultimately failed because of its deep ties to Sweet Baby Incorporated that already generated a lot of distrust, and also it was being praised and promoted by the least trustworthy people in games media. The studio's lead, Abubakar Salim, back in May, spoke in a video about how often he's been told that he hasn't earned his position, how he's faced prejudice and attacks. And
now, before he gets to this, specifically, he's talking about a stream on the Hypnotic channel. They do every Saturday night. There's clips about this passed around over the past week of things that were said. He's going to get into this in just a minute. And they were very critical of the Tales of Kenzera Zhao game. And I've talked about that on the channel a couple times. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to get this guy on our show this next week. So Abubakar Salim, I believe is his name. And we've been having some DM conversations because I think it would be great to have him on to talk about this. With that said, what Drops brings up here is a very, very valid point.
It actually felt like a genuine heart-to-heart, only for the video to end with him announcing a promotion for the game and it being heavily discounted, evaporating any goodwill that the video was supposed to represent and ultimately making it feel like a marketing scheme. The panel who chose to criticize Salim, made up of a few well-known figures on Twitter, instead of making thoughtful criticisms, only chose to mention things like Rafiki when making fun of the way that he dressed, or saying that he's never met his father when he mentioned his dad passing away, and that the studio should have been called Spear Chucker Studio. It's disgusting, abhorrent, blatant racist behavior that belongs nowhere near and does not represent any of the genuine criticisms that we've had for either Surgeon Studios, Abubakar Salim, or Tales of Kenzera Zhao, or the rest of the industry for that matter. I hate it because we exist in this weird place where, because of social media, the most outrageous opinions catch the most eyes, where comments like the ones that I just mentioned become the blanket scapegoat for genuine criticism. We have journalists and developers that are out there talking about how hateful gamers are. We have articles written about how Helldivers 2 was somehow promoting fascism, even though it was a handful of edgelords in a Discord. We have the senior editor of Kotaku on a public showcase telling people that she wants to fight them physically if they don't like the direction of games today. We have Forbes writing articles about Dragon Age the Veilguard, preemptively hand-waving any criticisms for what they call the modernized character creator and gender selection, because if you don't like it, don't use it. Yet women are criticizing the character creator because they don't feel represented by it.
Now, I'm going to stop right there and just say this. This is not just a social media thing. This has been around forever. As long as news has been out there, people will always take things out of context to fit a certain narrative, right? The things that they said in that stream, I could absolutely see how people would be like, that looks extremely racist. That looks really bad, right? And all that. And I can see why people would be critical of those comments. Now, can the people who are being critical of those comments also push through the idea of why they're being critical in the first place, right? But I do think that when you take context like that or content like that and you make statements like that, it does devalue the actual criticism that is being made about this, right? And when it comes to Tales of Kanzara in particular, the game itself, like I said, I have not played it. Now, if we do have him on the show, I will go through and I'll play the game. Because it does look good. I do think that it is a casualty of war when it comes to the DEI side of things and it being a part of Sweet Baby Inc. So with that said, there is nuance to this conversation, and nuance is obviously very much lost when it comes to any discussion with this stuff. Because once again, if you don't agree with it, you're an ist, a phobe, whatever. Go down the line.
And now somehow they're a part of the angry, edgy gamer crowd? I think that the worst part of all of this is how often I see individuals or groups being blamed. No, it's the men that are spreading the hate. No, it's the liberal women that are ruining games. No, it's white privilege. No, it's minorities taking undeserved jobs. No, it's the straights. No, it's the gays, when in fact, all of these issues are just plain old-fashioned corporate greed and corruption. It is consultancy industries that are made and managed by the governments that set the rules. It's large corporations hiring talentless, self-indulgent, bitter people because they need to check a box for tax incentives, using consultancy agencies to supplement their work at a lower rate and then train those self-same talentless employees. Then those employees find their way into leadership roles and narrative positions, taking corporate initiatives for diversity on a ride, using it as their mark to be left on the world, because without identity, their life has no meaning.
Oof. How often have you met somebody who is so obsessed with their pronouns and their identity that if you don't validate them, then you're a horrible person? That's literally all they have. And when you elevate them to some sort of leadership position, this is the adverse effects of that. When it's not about everybody else, it's about them. It's a narcissism that is associated with this, and that is associated with them, the extreme narcissist. And that's who has been put into these middle management and sometimes senior management positions over at these game studios. It's a virus. I mean, the idea of just being absolute narcissist and the whole woke aspect of it and the DEI side of things, like the idea that we moved away from hiring people based off of their ability to do the job well is asinine. It is so crazy that we've gotten to that point, not just in the video game industry, but society as a whole, to check boxes for tax incentives. He's 100% right. It comes back to money. But I would love to see an alternate timeline where if there's this timeline that we're in right now, where you're checking boxes, and then there's the other timeline where everything was just fine. There was no box check. You hired people off of meritocracy, the idea of how well they're going to do their job. And you allowed people to be creative and just go create things in their vision. You had hard conversations about this feature or this storyline or whatever it may be. And I would love to see what the profits look like here and what the profits look like here, because I swear, I feel that the profits here would far outweigh what's happening over on this side. But we'll never know, because we are in this timeline over here. There's more to this video. I encourage you to go check it out for yourself. It's over on the Legendary Drops channel. Great channel, blowing up really fast, and you can see why. Really, really good conversation. Do me a favor, subscribe right here to our channel. Go watch another video right here, and of course, check out the Legendary Drops channel down below. Appreciate you guys popping in. We'll see you guys next time.